Hello, and thank you for joining us here on our Saturday Matinee. I'm Matthew Wilkinson, historian with Heritage Mississauga. In today's program, we're going to be looking at some early Irish Catholic stories connecting here to the city of Mississauga. The presentation is called Diamond in the Rough, the Catholic Swamp, and remembering early Irish Catholic settlement here in Mississauga. The reason we call it Diamond in the Rough is that an early community that once was kind of centered around Ninth Line and Britannia Road up in kind of the northwest area of what is now Mississauga. Originally, this part of our city was part of the adjacent county of Trafalgar in Halton County, Trafalgar Township. But Diamond was the name of this community informally, if you will, to those that live there. But to the surrounding area, particularly the local newspaper and the Streetsville Review, the area was referred to as the Catholic Swamp. One of the lone reminders on the landscape today of the Catholic Swamp is the former St. Peter's Roman Catholic Mission Church on Ninth Line, just north of Britannia Road. But we're going to explore this story of this early community and kind of its roots and connections here in the city of Mississauga. Between 1825 and 1860, 60% of immigrants to Upper Canada were of Irish origin. Many were Protestant, but it was a mix of individuals of different faiths who became Catholics as well. And some of the push-pull factors included the land clearances, opportunity to own land and work in the New World. Many Irish immigrants came through the United States, but some came directly to Canada. But many of those who came to the United States also ended up in Canada in time. The first Irish to come, we often look at kind of early Irish settlement in this community as being connected to the potato famine years. And certainly we did have connections for those that came to Canada and ultimately settled in historic Mississauga as a result of migration during the potato famine. When we look at the early connections to the community of Diamond and the Catholic Swamp area of what is now Mississauga, most of those early settlers came before the famine years. Many came through the United States, but some immigrating directly from Ireland again. And settlement in this area of Mississauga was principally between 1820 and 1840. And so by the time the potato famine is well underway in Ireland, there's already kind of a settled community here in this part of Mississauga. There truly was a draw of free land, but we say that in local history circles with a bit of a smile on our face. Nothing is truly free, of course, in the world of government, and so things like an oath of allegiance, an application for land, an issuance of a location ticket, processing fee, surveyor's fee, etc. There were fees to everything. So even though free land drew many, again, nothing was truly free. But certainly it was affordable in the sense that land such as they would be available here, even with the nominal fees that were something that was unattainable in the old world for many of those that came to settle in Canada and indeed in historic Mississauga. The area of Diamond or the Catholic Swamp really was literally, socially, and geographically on the edge, on the periphery of two townships. Irish Catholics were not particularly welcome. They were seen as kind of the poorest or the lowest of the low. If in many circles, the Orange Lodge, which was a Protestant organization, of course, was firmly entrenched at the time that kind of early years of Catholic settlement came to be, and many of the communities were very Protestant in their leaning, kind of pushing early Catholics and principally Irish Catholics onto the peripheries of towns and townships and into basically undesirable areas of the city to kind of establish themselves, or what is the city today, of course. And you see in the map that we have here, we have concentrations of Irish settlement in areas. We've presences in historically in Port Credit in the Dixie area, of course in Streetsville with St. Joseph's, Dixie with St. Patrick's, Port Credit with St. Mary's Star of the Sea churches, but they were a little bit later coming in the story of evolution. Some of the churches in this case dating to the 1860s to the 1880s, but the earliest established churches were at Elmbank in the northeast corner of what is Mississauga today, and of course, the community of Diamond, St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church over at Ninth Line on the western border. And these two, the Elm Bank and the Diamond settlements, were the earliest and kind of the center points of early Catholic settlement and early Catholic worship here in historic Mississauga. Some early Irish communities to develop in our community. One of the earliest was Colonel Connell Baldwin, who is a fascinating individual who's involved in, after a military career, getting an extensive land grant in just outside of where Malton is today, up in northeast Mississauga. And he had a large estate, which he dubbed Cloonehee after his birthplace in Ireland. And Cloonehee, located in the vicinity of what would become Elm Bank, was really a focal point for kind of supporting early Irish immigration. And during the famine years, Colonel Baldwin opened up his property to the famine Irish, looking for a place outside of the confines of fever sheds and the wharf area of Toronto upon their immigration. And so many passed through Cloonehee on their way to establishing a life here in the New World. But through Cloonehee and the work of Connell Baldwin, we certainly see kind of the formation of Irish communities prior to the potato famine and then during the potato famine years. In the 1830s, the church at Elm Bank was established, which grew to be a very a large congregation and a large Irish Catholic presence on the landscape, and over 600 individuals were buried at the Elm Bank Roman Catholic Cemetery up on Fifth Line. And we also had early communities. Of course, we already mentioned Streetsville, but in the Dixie area, which Dixie was even known informally as Irishtown and Corktown in time. But then out on the western fringes, we had St. Peter's Roman Catholic Mission Church in the community of Diamond. Again, this dubbed by the Streetsville Review as the Catholic Swamp. So looking at some of the early churches in our community, and churches are a certain indication of Irish Catholic communities that have developed. We have Elm Bank, also known as St. Kevin's, amongst other names, established in about 1831, 1832. St. Joseph's Roman Catholic Church in Streetsville around 1830. St. Patrick's in Dixie, 1856, and St. Mary's Star of the Sea in Port Credit in 1880 is all kind of early establishment areas of Roman Catholic worship in our community, and almost entirely in their formative years, their parishioners were of Irish origin. So looking at the kind of the story of the Catholic swamp itself and its early years, the 1877 atlas, we can kind of picture here the vertical north-south road on the screen in the middle of the map is Ninth Line, and then the dot is circled around the intersection of Britannia Road and Ninth Line. And you can see just to the upper left of the dot itself, right in the middle of the map, you can see a little church and cross there, and that is St. Peter's Roman Catholic Mission Church, and the cross denoting a cemetery. And then you can see the landowners that are around this. Now, this map is from 1877. And already at that point, there's been some turnover in the community in terms of those that settled in the area. So some of those early settling Irish Catholic families are not here anymore come 1877. So you see kind of a mixture, a greater mixture of settlement in this area of people of different cultural backgrounds and different faiths, but still very much an Irish Catholic presence. And you can look at some of the names that appear on this map and in earlier maps of the area. And you can, many are of Irish Catholic origin. Here's just some of the names that appear on the map. And two most prominent ones in the community are down near the bottom, O'Connor and O'Hara, along with the Noonans, very much connected, McCarrans as well, and McCartan, very much connected to the lifeblood of this early community. And we look at the individuals who came to settle here, and really they came from all places in Ireland. We had lots of different places of origin, and so just some of the ones we've been able to trace to kind of dot the settlement origins from around different areas of Ireland. And it does tell you kind of a bit of a story. We're not quite sure how many of these families might have known each other prior to immigration, but certainly they get thrust together on the landscape here in historic Mississauga once they arrive in Canada. Looking at some of the maps, you can kind of see an overview of where the evolution, if you will, in the landscape of the area of the Catholic Swamp. So the red line denotes the border of Ninth Line today. That's the division between Trafalgar and Toronto townships, or Mississauga and Milton. And the road running horizontally near the bottom there is Britannia Road, and you can see just there's a creek that runs through across Ninth Line. This is the tributary of the 60 Mile Creek, which is still there today. And then just tucked into the corner here, just a little bit to the north and west of the intersection, is the church and cemetery of St. Peter's. And you just coming through in time, you can see kind of the evolution of it. It's still very much a rural farming community in 1975, the same in 1985. So we're not dealing with ancient history here. And you can see the subdivision begins in 1993 with the flood control pond, better known as Osprey Marsh today, and residential development happening by 1993. And 2002, things are well underway in terms of building development. The church, of course, is still there, just tucked into the corner on the northwest corner. And there's 2005 and then 2014. You can kind of just get a picture of the massive changes this area has seen in a very, very short period of time. But sitting through it all and still there today is the former St. Peter's Roman Catholic Mission Church. Been part of that community for generations. So, it's important to think in terms of understanding the social landscape as the diamond, the Catholic Swamp, being on the periphery or the border of two townships, in a sense, belonging to both but wanted by neither. In that sense, the Catholic Swamp was more than just a nickname given to it. It was kind of the way in which Protestant people seem to think of the area as well, and those that lived in it. The first land grants in this area were issued in 1820, and many of the early settling families had come to reside in the area by the late 1820s, and you saw settlement begin in earnest. Settlement duties, things like land clearances, fences, building a house, having a crop under cultivation, clearing road allowances. These were all something that these early settlers had to deal with on kind of carving their place out in the landscape. The Catholic Swamp, as the name might suggest, there was propensity for extreme flooding with the tributary of the 60 Mile Creek, and we have stories of flooded farm fields and giant swamp oak trees, and so not the greatest land either, but nonetheless something they had to carve an ability to live out of. A very hostile land, or at least something that was not accustomed to being cleared for farming right away. And of course, then you also have hints on the landscape of something else. There's a road in the community that called 10th Line, and as Mississauga expanded and evolved, 10th Line became 10th Line West. And forgive one historian's a little bit of humor, but west of what? And in true cadastral survey sense, west of nothing. 10th Line was not west. 10th Line did not belong to the Mississauga survey or what was in the Toronto Township survey. 10th Line was part of the Trafalgar Township survey of Halton County, and its center point, its radiating out, was not here on Ontario Street like Mississauga's was, but their center point was over on Tremaine Road. And so this is actually, if you look at the original survey in which it was done, this is east of Tremaine Road, therefore it's 10th Line East. Again, as a surveyed line, this is simply the 10th North-South Road east of their starting point. And similarly to 9th Line as well, it didn't belong to Mississauga historically. It belonged to an adjacent county and was only added to Mississauga through amalgamation in later part of the 20th century. And so you really have kind of these kind of expressions on the landscape, if you will, that make you wonder about kind of the early years in the history of the community. Land was a challenge. Of course, we had flooding, freezing, stories of skating across the fields, giant swamp oak trees, wheat crops that were sometimes poor in yield. And there was a real belief within the community, some of the stories have been passed down, that life was greener elsewhere, and it led some of the younger people further afield in terms of trying to find their way in this world. In fact, one of the challenges of life in the Catholic swamp was keeping their young people within the community to build upon the work of previous generations. And sometimes that did not happen. And you see kind of ebbs and flows in the population number, and evidence through the size of the congregation at the church as well, of those that remained in the area. Um, there are building blocks in communities, of course, and we see some of the pictures where a settled landscape is emerging. There's a picture of the Kelly family log cabin believed to be built about 1825, and this picture from about 1910 or so. So the cabin is still in use. But one of the interesting things here is, if you look closely at the picture and the building in the background, you'll see that it's actually two buildings joined together, and the building on the right with the horizontal logs is likely the earliest part of the building, and then the addition to the left, which shows horizontal framework, horizontal siding over wooden frame, like you represents a more modern addition. And you can see what looks to be two front doors. So perhaps two families sharing a single hearth with a central fireplace, or just an enlarged house that has made a more, say modern addition to the historic log cabin. A little hard to say. The picture doesn't give you the answers, but there certainly is evidence here of generational change over time within a single family. The Catholic swamp begins to emerge just, as other settlers settle in the area, and there gets to be commonalities within their experiences, neighbors leaning on neighbors, intermarriages, common general store, common church, and the like, and a community begins to emerge. And again, that community called itself Diamond, but to the outsider world, the outsider Protestant world, in the Streets Review newspaper, the name Catholic Swamp emerged. Means the same place, but again, obviously one taken in a derogatory reference, not only to the place, but perhaps also to the people. Um, Part of the challenges within this community, and like many others, was young people finding work. And so we do see a lot of stories passed down of young people leaving the community to obtain employment along the Welland Canal. As many as 25 young men were lured away, and many of them did not return to the community. And so you kind of have this gap in the community, if you will, of a small generation of people, numerically, that went elsewhere for employment and ultimately lived elsewhere. We do see declines in population numbers and just the area itself in the early 1820s after kind of first arrival, and then again in the 1880s. And each time, kind of the community does revive itself through either coming of age or the returning of former settlers from working abroad. And there's a picture of St. Peter's Roman Catholic Mission Church, and its adjacent graveyard. The cemetery and church very much elements on our landscape today that remain and reflect or remind us on the past of this community. And this church was once truly the focal point of the Catholic community in that area, and very much tied to early Catholic settlement, early Irish Catholic settlement. Almost all of the early parishioners were of Irish background. There's a legend of the walk to establish the congregation. In 1819, Bartholomew Connor and his brother-in-law Charles O'Hara walked 40 miles, or reportedly walked 40 miles from Diamond, or the Catholic Swamp, to Dundas, Ontario, and convinced Father O'Reilly to come to the area to celebrate Mass. And that was in 1819, and a Mass was celebrated in the O'Hara log cabin. St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church, the congregation was formally established in 1823, and a log church opened in 1824. Just to give you a timeline, that the log church was replaced by a frame church or wooden church in 1853, and this church was bricked over in 1882. And that church largely survives today, although it was moved back from the road so that the front wall of the church today rests on the foundation of the original rear wall location. And so these things do happen where, you think of buildings as permanent on the landscape, but occasionally they too will get up and move, in this case, remaining on the same property and moving just a short distance back from the road. The first burial is dated to 1825, and the church and cemetery were founded on land donated by an early resident by the name of Daniel Highland under the direction of Father Edward Gordon. The first baptism took place in 1830 under Alexander McKinnon, and there's an old plaque on the side of this historic church that reads, 1823, St. Peter's R.C. Church, first in the area. And it really is one of the kind of the granddaddies of the Irish Catholic movement here in historic Mississauga, one of the earliest and oldest surviving churches, Catholic churches in the community, and the oldest church within the Hamilton Diocese. Hamilton Roman Catholic Diocese, again founded as a congregation in 1823, and the existing church built in 1882, although 1853, and then bricked over in 1882, and then ultimately moved back from the road slightly. So you have this historic church with kind of a long timeline of not only use, but also some slight changes in it. It is important to note also that the church remains in use today, although it is no longer home to St. Peter's Roman Catholic congregation. That congregation declined significantly in recent years, to the point that its last members, if you will, were absorbed into Holy Trinity Church Holy Rosary Church in Milton, which was its parent church. And so this church now has been leased out to other congregational uses within the community, and still continues to function today as a church and a house of worship. In the 1850s, there were 50 families on the parish register, but only 9 families left in the 1880s. It rebounded a bit after the First World War, so we had about 30 to 35 families on the parish registers in the 1920s and 1930s. But then as it kind of experienced a slow and steady decline, largely from attrition over time, from the 1960s onwards, and to the point where the church formally closed in the late 1990s. So looking at the cemetery today, you see kind of a quiet tribute and setting to early settlers in this community, those who worked and toiled so hard on the landscape to kind of carve this early community out of the land. Hat tip here to Russell Lee for many years of voluntary service in upkeeping and caring for the cemetery, despite the fact he was not somebody who actually attended that church while it was operating. He volunteered after the fact and kind of led the cemetery restoration plan, and just has done an exceptional job over time. Looking at some of the stories of early diamond, we had Fullerton's Weaver Shop and the California General Store, and the community of Diamond. California was the name of their general store, and we do believe that it was also home to the Weaver Shop, Fullerton Weaver Shop, that the store and Weaver Shop were one and the same. And again, the community itself went by the name of Diamond. There was a school associated with the community. It was located on a 10th line, known as SS number 10 Trafalgar. And to the residents, they referred to it as either the white school, and that was in reference to the punishment of some of the boys for misbehaving was to paint the building white. And it was said that it was such a common practice that it was a gleaming white building for most of its life. That was located on 10th line near Eglinton Avenue. It was also known locally as Miller Schoolhouse because it was on part of the Miller property. Its formal name, again, SS number 10 Trafalgar. We had, much like other communities in the area, we had early diseases and epidemics challenge the ability of this community to survive. And in 1846-1847, cholera swept through this part of Peel County, and likely claiming Ani and Lawrence Fogarty, November 13th and December 26, 1847. They are likely victims of the cholera epidemic who are buried at St. Peter's, and there are possibly many more that fell to other epidemics and pandemics over time that are also associated with this historic cemetery. One of the prominent early families is one of the surviving buildings other than the church is the former O'Hara farmhouse. And the O'Hara house, which replaced their original log cabin, the surviving brick house is built in 1850 and still stands on Ninth Line. There were several generations of O'Haras that farmed this land, and actually some of them end up down in the Dixie area. But he had Charles O'Hara Sr., Charles O'Hara Jr., Alexander, Peter, William, and Michael as being people that were very much involved in the kind of the ebbs and flows of life here at the Catholic Swamp. The house remained, or the property remained, in the O'Hara family from 1819 all the way up to 1976 when the family finally sold, and there's now a new developer or new owner on the property today. They operated a sawmill on the tributary of the 60 Mile Creek, and this is believed to be a picture of that sawmill, although it is a very poor one, as it was a faded image that had some water damage to it when it came to us. But you can just make out, very quietly in the background the ghostly image of the sawmill building, and then obviously some workers in the foreground. They possibly were also blacksmiths, as there's some reference to Michael O'Hara being a blacksmith. And on the property, there is a building that was locally referred to as a blacksmith shop. This has been removed and replaced by a modern garage building, but nonetheless, there may have been a surviving blacksmith building on the property. Also, together with the O'Haras, you had the O'Connor family, and there's a park today in Mississauga in that area referred to as O'Connor Park that reflects on this early prominent family. Bartholomew Crescent is also named for Bartholomew O'Connor. Bartholomew and Sarah O'Connor had 7 children, including Ellen, Michael, Isabella, Teresa, Mary, Charles, Maria. Sorry, my math was wrong. Had 11 children, including Margaret, Sarah, Miranda, and Jane as well in that mix. And a grandson named John sold the family farm in 1956 and moved to Dixie. And so you've got this kind of direct link from the O'Connors up in the Catholic Swamp area, the Diamond area of Mississauga, connecting to the O'Connors down in the Dixie area. There is a family reunion of the Sanford, O'Gorman, or O'Connor families in 1910. They're interrelated through marriage, and you can see the grand house behind them. This is a picture truly of a family that has established themselves and has made it here in Canada. Also, if you might be familiar with the Vaudeville Act, the 6 O'Connor sisters, which were billed from Etobicoke but had been born and raised in the Dixie area. They were daughters of John O'Connor, who had settled in Dixie in the 1850s. The Vaudeville stars functioning between 1910 and 1937 included Mary Ann, Anna, Ada, Kathleen, Vera, and Nellie. And again, they were the great-granddaughters of original settler Bartholomew O'Connor, and they were known again as the singing O'Connor sisters. The Noonan family, William Noonan had emigrated, again, also of Irish origin, but came kind of indirect route, coming here from Pennsylvania in 1825. Family was originally from County Cork, and the Noonan family farmed here at the Catholic Swamp for over 160 years. And so the Noonans aren't here any longer, but they were here right up to the time we started looking at this property in the early 2000s. But the Noonans were very much once connected to the lifeblood of this community, and there was a time in the mid 20th century when the name Diamond and Catholic Swamp had faded, that the area became known as Noonan's Corners, principally because they owned farms on adjacent corners. The MacLeod family, Mary and Murdoch MacLeod, arrived in 1841 from Scotland. They were Scottish Presbyterians, but lived within this very Irish and Catholic community. They had several children, including surviving ones: Angus, Norman, William, James, Neil, and Janet. They did face many hardships, but the house they built, a substantial, if not simple, red brick house with buff corners, was built circa 1850, and was stood up in Mississauga until 2004. But again, much like the other, there's nothing left of the kind of the MacLeod permanent presence, if you will, on the landscape. There we go to the McCarran family. We have more recorded on the McCarrans and more images of the McCarrans than any of the other families at the Catholic Swamp. The patriarch is listed as Owen McCarran. We're not sure if it's Owen or Own. And he arrived here in 1820 after serving the British Crown during the Napoleonic Wars, and he received land as a part of his service payment. 3 of 7 children died before 8 years, and the rest of the children were able to the rest of the children were able to reach adulthood and carry on the family names and farming in the area. Owen's sons were Owen, William, and Robert, and they all farmed in the area. At one point, the McCarrans owned 3 of the farms at 3 of the 4 corners of the Catholic Swamp, including the area where the Osprey Marsh is today. Was originally part of Robert McCarran's farm, and the family farmed here from about 1820 until 1986, when the last of the McCarran farms were sold and the family ceased to be connected to its historic landscape. Some pictures of them. Probably one of my favorite is of Isabella McCarran on the swing set there, and you can see a McCarran family gathering at the Catholic Swamp with the family members all gathered around. Some really telling pictures from the McCarran family. And there we have a barn raising on the McCarran farm, and a picture of John McCarran with his wife and children. Again, more pictures from the McCarran farm, several with cows or horses and the like. But again, just lovely pictures, kind of highlighting, expressing kind of the story and the whimsical nature of life on the frontier. Other landmarks in the community, the one on the left, the Kelly Douglas House, was built circa 1840. It is no longer. It was demolished a couple of years ago. And the Cordingley House, which was built in 1884 up towards almost as far north as Derry along 9th Line, is now a heritage home that is without an owner, or without I guess a caretaker, if you will, in terms of who's going to live in the building. So if you're interested, there are lots of ways to find out more about the Cordingley House, but very much, a historic part of our community that we're hopeful that it has a very positive future in front of it. Other ways that the community history is connected: if you go walk around Osprey Marsh on the recreational trails today, you'll find a history plaques, as well as plaques on flora and fauna and whatnot. But the history plaque tells you about Diamond and the story of the Catholic Swamp, and some of the early pictures that we have are found on the interpretive plaque that's along Osprey Marsh Trail. And again, St. Peter's Roman Catholic Mission Church today was home for a period of time to St. Joseph Bakita Parish, and that parish is now spun out to build its own home, and there's another congregation that's using the old historic church here at the Catholic Swamp. And for that, we'll bring you to the end of our program for today. I hope you've enjoyed this really brief look at life and times and some of the families that connected to the story of Diamond, or the Catholic Swamp. And again, as always, please share your stories with us, and we look forward to connecting with you and exploring more about our local community history. Thank you.